July 31st, 1970, 9 p.m. The International Hotel in Las Vegas was packed with 2,000 people eagerly waiting for Elvis Presley's opening night performance. This wasn't just another Vegas show. This was Elvis's triumphant return to live performing after years of disappointing movies and declining cultural relevance. The 1968 comeback special had reminded the world that Elvis could still perform at the highest level, but now he had to prove he could sustain it night after night. The lights dimmed dramatically. The orchestra began playing the opening fanfare with building intensity. And then, from backstage, the announcement everyone had been waiting breathlessly for. "Ladies and gentlemen, Elvis Presley." Elvis walked onto the stage in his iconic white jumpsuit, guitar in hand, looking confident and ready. And before he could sing a single note, before he could speak a single word, before he could even acknowledge the crowd, all 2,000 people in the audience rose to their feet in a thunderous standing ovation. The applause was absolutely deafening. People were screaming, crying, cheering with unbridled enthusiasm. This was the welcome back Elvis had desperately hoped for, the validation that people still cared deeply, still wanted to see him perform live after all these years. But Elvis didn't smile broadly. He didn't wave enthusiastically. He didn't bask in the adulation and soak up the moment. Instead, he held up both hands in a firm stopping gesture and spoke clearly into the microphone. "Please," Elvis said firmly, "please sit down." The audience was utterly confused. Standing ovations were supposed to be accepted graciously by performers. They bowed, waved, smiled, soaked in the applause. They didn't tell people to sit down. That wasn't how this worked. But Elvis was absolutely insistent. "I appreciate your enthusiasm. I really do, but please, sit down. I haven't done anything yet. I haven't sung a note. I haven't performed. I haven't earned this applause." The crowd, slowly, reluctantly, began to settle back into their seats. There was confused murmuring throughout the room. Was Elvis serious about this? Was this some kind of act, part of the show? "You're giving me a standing ovation for walking onto a stage," Elvis continued firmly. "That's not something worth standing for. When a performer walks out, all they've done is show up. Showing up isn't an achievement, it's the minimum requirement. I want your standing ovation, if I get one tonight, to be because I gave you a performance worth standing for, not because my name is Elvis Presley." The room went completely silent. No one quite knew how to respond. "So here's what's going to happen," Elvis said, a slight smile finally appearing on his face. "I'm going to perform. I'm going to give you everything I have tonight, every ounce of energy, every bit of talent, every moment of passion I can deliver. And then, at the end of the show, if you feel I earned it, if you believe I gave you something worth standing for, then you can stand. But not before. Deal?" After a moment of stunned silence, someone in the audience shouted, "Deal!" Others joined in. "Deal! We'll wait. Make us stand, Elvis." Elvis grinned. "All right then, let's get to work." What followed was one of the most intense, passionate, and memorable performances of Elvis's entire career. He opened with "That's All Right," the song that had started everything for him 16 years earlier. But he didn't just sing it casually. He attacked it with ferocity, pouring energy and conviction into every single line. He moved constantly, prowling the stage like the young Elvis people remembered from the explosive 1950s. He engaged directly with the audience, made eye contact, connected with individual faces in the crowd. He didn't just perform songs mechanically. He lived them, felt them, made them matter in the moment. Between songs, Elvis talked to the audience like they were friends gathered in his living room. He told stories about his early career struggles, about his time in the Army, about what these songs meant to him personally. He was vulnerable, honest, funny, self-deprecating in ways the public rarely saw. "You know, I spent the last 10 years making movies that weren't very good," Elvis said during one break. "I'm not going to pretend they were artistic triumphs. They were formulaic, predictable, and most of them were pretty bad. But you know what? I showed up. I did my job. I gave them what they paid for. But showing up and doing the minimum isn't the same as giving people something worth remembering. Tonight, I want to give you something worth remembering. The audience was completely captivated. This wasn't the distant, untouchable Elvis of the Hollywood movies. This was a real person, working hard, being brutally honest about his limitations and his aspirations. Elvis sang for 90 minutes without a break. He performed rock and roll classics, emotional ballads, powerful gospel songs, exciting new material. His voice was powerful and controlled. His movements were sharp and deliberate. Every moment felt purposeful, earned, meaningful. And through it all, the audience sat attentively. Not because they weren't excited. They were screaming enthusiastically, applauding loudly, cheering wildly after every song. But they remained seated throughout. Because Elvis had asked them to. Because he'd made them understand that a standing ovation needed to mean something real. As the concert approached its conclusion, Elvis deliberately slowed down the energy. He sat on a stool at the center of the stage, guitar in hand, and began speaking quietly and intimately to the audience. I want to thank you all for being here tonight, for giving me a chance to prove I can still do this at the highest level, for caring enough to show up. A lot has changed since 1956. I'm not the same performer I was back then. I can't move quite as fast, can't hit every note quite as easily. But I can give you something that young Elvis couldn't give you. Experience, maturity, understanding of what these songs really mean. He began playing Can't Help Falling in Love, his voice tender and sincere. The entire audience swayed together, many with tears in their eyes. This wasn't just a performance anymore. It was a moment of genuine connection between an artist and an audience who had grown up together, who had shared history, who understood each other. When the final note faded, Elvis stood up slowly. He looked out at the 2,000 faces looking back at him, and he said simply, "Now, if you feel I've earned it, you may stand." The response was immediate and universal. Every single person in that room rose to their feet simultaneously. The applause was even louder than it had been at the beginning of the show, but this time, it meant something profound. This time, it was earned through 90 minutes of exceptional performance. Elvis bowed deeply, genuine gratitude on his face. "Thank you," he said simply. "This one I'll accept, because now we both know what it's for." News of what Elvis had done spread quickly through the entertainment industry. Stopping a standing ovation at the beginning of a show and insisting on earning it through performance was unprecedented. Other performers had different reactions. Some thought it was brilliant. Frank Sinatra reportedly said, "Elvis reminded everyone, including other performers, that applause should mean something. We've gotten lazy, accepting praise for just showing up. He challenged that. Others thought it was risky." "What if the performance had been mediocre?" one critic asked. "What if he'd stopped the opening ovation and then failed to earn a closing one? That would have been absolutely humiliating." But Elvis's band members understood what he'd been doing. Elvis was setting a standard for himself, guitarist James Burton explained. He was publicly committing to excellence. By refusing the unearned ovation, he created an obligation to deliver something worth standing for. That's pressure, but it's also motivation. Elvis continued this practice for the rest of his Vegas residency. Every opening night, if the audience stood before he'd performed anything, he'd ask them to sit down. "Let me earn it first," he'd say, and every single night, he did. The practice became part of his legend. People who attended Elvis's Vegas shows would tell others, "Don't stand when he comes out. He'll make you sit down. Wait until the end. Trust me, you'll want to stand then." In interviews, Elvis was asked about why he stopped the standing ovations. "Doesn't it feel good to be applauded?" reporters would ask. "Of course it feels good," Elvis would answer, "but there's a difference between applause that's just automatic, because people recognize your name, and applause that's genuinely earned through your work. The first kind is empty. The second kind matters." "But you're Elvis Presley. You've earned respect through your entire career." "Past achievements don't earn present applause," Elvis would say. What I did in 1956 shouldn't get me a standing ovation in 1970. What I do tonight should get me a standing ovation tonight. Every performance is a new contract with the audience. They give me their time and money. I give them the best performance I can deliver. When I've upheld my end of that contract, then, and only then, have I earned their approval. This philosophy extended beyond his performances. Elvis applied the same principle to his personal interactions. He didn't expect special treatment based on being famous. He didn't assume people should defer to him automatically. One of his bodyguards recalled a moment in 1972 when a hotel clerk initially didn't recognize Elvis and was somewhat dismissive. After Elvis calmly handled the situation and the clerk realized who he was, she was mortified and apologized profusely. "Don't apologize," Elvis told her. "You treated me like any other customer until I gave you a reason to treat me differently." That's exactly right. I don't deserve special treatment just for being Elvis Presley. I deserve special treatment, if I deserve it at all, by being respectful and kind to you. That's how this should work. As Elvis's health deteriorated in the mid-1970s, maintaining this standard became increasingly difficult. There were shows where he struggled, where his voice wasn't at its best, where the medications affected his performance. On those nights, the tradition of earning the standing ovation became painful. Elvis would finish a show knowing he hadn't delivered his best. The audience would still stand, because by then, they loved him regardless of the quality of any individual performance. But Elvis knew the difference. Band members reported that after weaker shows, Elvis would be depressed, saying, "They stood, but I didn't earn it tonight. They stood because they loved the idea of Elvis, not because I gave them something worth standing for." In August 1977, during what would be his final concert tour, Elvis performed in Indianapolis. His voice was weak, his energy low. When he finished the show, the audience stood and applauded. Elvis accepted it, but backstage, he told his cousin Billy Smith, "I used to make people sit down until I'd earned their standing. Now I can't make them sit down even when I know I haven't earned it. That's how far I've fallen." 6 days later, Elvis was dead. The story of Elvis stopping the standing ovation became one of the most retold anecdotes about his character. It represented his humility, his work ethic, his belief that respect must be earned continuously rather than assumed automatically. Musicians who came after Elvis often cited this moment as influential. "Elvis taught me that you can't coast on past achievements," Bruce Springsteen said years later. "Every time you walk on stage, you're starting from zero. The audience deserves your best tonight, not a replay of your greatest hits from 20 years ago." The story also resonated with people outside of music. Business leaders, athletes, teachers, people in all fields saw the wisdom in Elvis's approach. Success today doesn't guarantee success tomorrow. Respect must be maintained through consistent excellence, not assumed based on historical achievement. At Graceland, there's a small exhibit dedicated to Elvis's 1970 Vegas residency. Among the jumpsuits and set lists is a quote, enlarged and displayed prominently. "A standing ovation at the beginning of a performance is applause for who you used to be. A standing ovation at the end is applause for who you are right now. Always aim for the second one." Elvis Presley, July 1970. The standing ovation Elvis stopped wasn't just about one moment in one show. It was about a philosophy of respect and achievement that Elvis carried throughout his career, when he was healthy and disciplined enough to maintain it. Elvis understood something that many successful people forget. Past achievements create expectations, not entitlements. Being Elvis Presley meant audiences expected great performances, but it didn't mean he deserved applause before delivering one. By making the audience sit down until he'd earned their standing ovation, Elvis was setting a standard for himself. He was publicly committing to excellence. He was acknowledging that his reputation created an obligation to perform at a level worthy of that reputation. The tragedy is that Elvis eventually lost the ability to maintain that standard. His final years were marked by performances that didn't earn the standing ovations they received, and Elvis knew it. That knowledge, that he was being applauded for who he used to be rather than who he currently was painful for him. But on July 31st, 1970, Elvis Presley stood on a Vegas stage and reminded everyone, the audience, the entertainment industry, and himself, that respect is earned through present action, not past glory. That showing up is not the same as performing, that a standing ovation should mean something. He made 2,000 people sit down so he could earn the right to make them stand up. And in doing so, he demonstrated more integrity and humility than most performers show in their entire careers. The standing ovation. Elvis stopped became the standing ovation he truly earned.